So Jehovah's Witnesses really like talking about how they don't have rules, they have principles.
If we're paying attention when we're reading the Bible, we train our conscience with Bible principles so we can make such decisions without needing a long list of rules.
But if you've ever been a Jehovah's Witness, you know that they definitely do have rules. But sometimes these rules aren't necessarily written down, they're more social rules, unwritten rules that you understand, ooh, if I do this thing, there will be social consequences. So today, that's what we're going to talk about. Unwritten rules as a Jehovah's Witness. Things that you're not necessarily going to find in writing, but if you are a witness or have been a witness, you know are definitely true. Rule number 1, never give credit to Jesus. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses definitely do believe in Jesus. They believe that he is the Christ. They believe that Jesus is Lord, that he's king, head of the congregation, and all that stuff that most Christians believe. But you almost never, in day-to-day conversation, in the meetings, ever hear anybody give credit to Jesus. I'm not saying it never happens, especially when there's talks about the congregation. Jesus will be referred to as the head of the congregation. But like, here, for mainstream Christians, they'd say stuff like, Jesus is Lord, thank Jesus, thank the Lord, by which they mean Jesus. Lots of Jesus-y stuff. They're kind of like a Christian religion of some kind. But if you were in the door-to-door ministry with your fellow Jehovah's Witnesses, and you started talking about how much you love Jesus, and giving credit to Jesus, people would look at you like you were a Satan worshiper. Maybe not that much, but they would think that something was wrong with you for sure, because Jehovah's Witnesses give all glory to Jehovah. They say all glory to Jehovah all the time, as a matter of fact. Giving credit to Jesus is something they specifically avoid. In fact, their publications have talked about the fact that in the early days of the publication, they gave too much credit to Jesus.
First, Jehovah's servants came to have the proper view of the importance of God's name. Faithful early Bible students viewed the ransom arrangement as the Bible's main teaching. That explains why the Watchtower often focused on Jesus. For example, in its first year of publication, the magazine mentioned the name Jesus 10 times more than the name Jehovah. Regarding the Bible students' early years, the Watchtower of March 15, 1976 noted that they gave overbalanced importance to Jesus.
This mostly comes from the fact that Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in the Trinity. They don't believe that Jesus and God are co-equal in any way. They definitively believe that Jehovah is God, the big boy God of all the big boy gods, and Jesus is like his assistant, but in a definitively lesser role.
I don't want to have to deal with it.
And that's why you have an assistant regional manager.
Yes, it is. Assistant to the regional manager.
Same thing.
No, it's not. It's lower, so.
It's close.
Giving credit to Jesus is kind of like worshiping him, and they definitely don't want you to worship him because they want you to worship Jehovah. In fact, witnesses would say even Jesus gave credit to his Father. And that's true. Jesus didn't really tell people to worship him when he was on earth, so based, I guess. Still, though, there's a weird thing where they talk about Jesus began ruling his kingdom in 1914. Jesus is king is a thing they believe, but it's not really a thing you would say as an affirmation or even like as just an aphorism in day-to-day life. Everything goes back to Jehovah. We give glory to Jehovah, praise Jehovah, thank Jehovah. If you started to say thank Jesus, people would think, are you like a secret Baptist or something? What's going on with you? You're not going to find anything in writing that says don't go around talking about how Jesus is Lord all the time, because, you know, they do believe that Jesus is Lord. But for them, Lord doesn't mean, like, most high. It means, like, Lord. Just like, it's an honorific that respects his authority. He's not, like, Lord our God. He's, like, Lord Vader. Jesus is Darth Vader now. His channel is edgy. Second thing, you did not have a good day at work. What I mean by this is, you aren't supposed to have a good day doing secular stuff in the world. Ooh! That's not to say that nobody ever says that they had a good day at work. That's not what I'm saying. But if you start talking about how much you enjoy your work, how much effort you put into your work, how satisfied you are by your work, and that work is not for the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, people are going to start looking at you funny. Why are you so satisfied seeking great things for yourself in Satan's system of things? meetings. For witnesses and other evangelical groups, being happy on Earth is definitively not the point. Earth is sort of a trial run for Armageddon. You're supposed to be miserable now. That's what Jesus said would happen. Things are gonna go from bad to worse. We're in the time of the end, and we're shortly before the last of the last days, before the, triple last of the last days to the third power. So if you had a really great time on your vacation, you might not necessarily talk about all the fun stuff you did in and of itself. If you did something fun outdoors, for example, you might talk about that, but you would quickly correct yourself to mentioning how it gave you a greater appreciation for creation. Oh, it was so nice to be out in Jehovah's creation. This is what it's going to be like in paradise all the time. Can't you wait for the paradise? If you ever have a conversation with a witness that goes to secular territory, talking about some social or political issue, even just like a horrible crime that happened, like a shooting, if you start talking about what to do about that or what your opinions on it are, that's an immediate shutdown, and the witness will immediately revert their course to, which is why we're so grateful for Jehovah's Kingdom. Thank goodness we don't have to worry about this kind of stuff soon, because the new world will be here. Jehovah's got it all figured out. So, did you have a good day at work? Well, it was okay, but it's work. I'm here now at the meetings. Like, I love so much, and the meetings are great, and this is the really great thing, is the meetings. This one is a little bit more specific, and this was brought up by somebody in my Discord named Ashley, who I want to credit for me stealing her idea. Grandparents, if your children are disfellowshipped and then they have kids, it is sort of your responsibility to preach to the kids and try and convert them. You won't find this written down anywhere, but anybody who left the organization will tell you that this is absolutely the case. Fun true story, my witness mom actually told me and my wife that we shouldn't have kids because it would be irresponsible to bring them up in a divided household, so. Ugh. If your parents are witnesses and you are not, and you have kids and don't want to raise them as witnesses, you are in a very tough position. You can't necessarily just rely on your parents watching your kids, because when you're not looking, they're going to be showing them Caleb and Sophia videos and showing them the Bible storybook, which isn't called that anymore, but everyone calls it that anyway, another unwritten rule. Heck, they might even bring your kids out in service, like we definitely did with my unbelieving uncle's kids when they visited their witness family. This is back when I was a witness, and oh yeah, our whole mission, the whole time, was to give a good witness for these kids. Can we get them to come to the meetings? Maybe we can get them to comment at the meetings. If they like going to meetings, then they'll want to come to meetings, and maybe they can get their parents to take them to the meetings back home, and it'll bring the kids back. They'll see, now that they have kids, that they need Jehovah in their life. No parent outside of the Jehovah's Witness religion has ever had a successful family. I guess like in Israelite times, there were good families. In the, for 1 century following Jesus' death, there were good parents, and then there were just thousands of years where there were not good parents, and then now there are some good parents in the 8.5 million strong organization of Jehovah's Witnesses, but everybody else in the world, the family's terrible. They're awful. You can't let your son raise his son as just some nothing, as a non-witness of Jehovah. I kind of lost track of my thought and just kept going, hoping that something clever would come out of it, and nope, and now I'm talking about this. This is one of the ways in which witnesses break families apart that kind of goes unreported. It's not just that when I got disfellowshipped, I lost my relationship with my parents, but I don't know if my eventual kids will have a relationship with their grandparents. My parents might not want anything to do with my kids, or even if I want them to have a relationship with my parents, which I definitely do, I don't know if I can trust them to not be constantly trying to indoctrinate my kids. These are all hypotheticals. I'm not pregnant. I personally am not pregnant. Nobody in this household is pregnant. Mom, secretly watching my videos, probably, hopefully, I'd call me. Next thing, Smurfs? Okay, so the thing that actually inspired this video was there was a post on the XJW Reddit that got a lot of upvotes, and it was really good. Somebody made like an infographic of things that you can't do as a Jehovah's Witness, and like, the first thing on the list was no Smurfs, and I looked at this and I thought, what? I watched Smurfs all the time, As a kid, my parents were children of the 80s, and I think that they were the ones who introduced me to the Smurfs. But there is a thing where some witnesses were definitely not allowed to watch the Smurfs. It was considered demonic, and in fact, one of the most infamous, viral before going viral was a thing witness stories, was the story of a demonized, possessed troll doll. Not troll doll, I'm literally talking about Smurfs, you idiot. A possessed Smurf doll that was so riddled with demons that it got up in the middle of an assembly or meeting, depending on where you hear this story, and walked out of the Kingdom Hall / assembly. So Smurfs are real bad for some people, but I think this illustrates a really interesting point. For some people, they grew up in an environment where Smurfs were completely off limits. I actually don't even remember the Smurfs being particularly magical outside of the bad guy was like some kind of wizard, Gilgamesh or Gargamel or Gargantuan or Gary, but this is kind of an interesting thing. Depending on where you grow up regionally, there are different rules, though they are not written down. There were some territories where nobody in the congregation let their kids watch SpongeBob SquarePants because there were, stupid rumors that it was secretly gay propaganda, or that it was too violent, or that they showed, as it was put to me once, rear ends in the show. For my congregation, it was definitely Pokemon growing up. Couldn't have Pokemon cards, couldn't watch the Pokemon TV show, mostly because they evolve and evolution is bad. So if a kid sees a Charmander evolve into a Charmeleon, he's gonna be sucking on Darwin's teat. But there were some of my friends who were like, what? We're allowed to watch Pokemon? Here, I have Pokemon on my Game Boy. Do you want to play it out in service discreetly? Because this is not fun at all? And I would say yes. And then I would play Pokemon. And it was fun, and probably the least objectionable video game that a child could play. I've seen some people say that witnesses aren't allowed to watch Star Wars, and that, to me, is insane, because I'm obviously a big Star Wars fan. Got Rey, inverted camera. Above my head space is Rey riding on a speeder. I've got a bunch of Star Wars toys. I grew up loving Star Wars. It was introduced to me by my parents. They were so excited to introduce me to Star Wars, as were my grandparents. I come from a bunch of nerds. Is that surprising to hear? But there are regions where Star Wars was absolutely off limits, because isn't the Force just magic? And yeah, you know what else is magic? The literal actual magic that happens in all the Disney movies. And so some witnesses grow up definitely not being able to watch any Disney movies. And then if you're like me and my friends and most of the people that I knew growing up, you went to see every Disney movie. It's Disney. It's magic, but it's it's Disney, come on. For a group that relies on biblical principles, what actually seems to happen is just socially, an elder and his family will decide that something is wrong, and that will spread throughout a congregation, or that might spread from a circuit overseer into many different congregations, and thus it becomes the culture that a certain thing is off limits, even though there's nothing in writing saying you can't do it. You don't do it because if somebody finds out that you watch SpongeBob, they might say, oh, but I don't watch that show because I think it's bad, and then you would go, oh, but I think it's funny and fine. And then this would cause a rift in the congregation that might collapse God's organization. When you think about the stumbling thing, it really doesn't hold up at all, does it? In spite of this, the witnesses are very proud of saying, we don't put out lists, unlike some organizations, of things that you are and aren't allowed to see.
And from the governing body's viewpoint, of course, you know, we're not trying to make all sorts of rules, rigid rules with regard to this.
And they don't. But what they do is they put out pictures and videos that clearly depict a knockoff of a really famous, popular thing, showing it to be bad, and so the viewer understands, I shouldn't be watching stuff like that. For example, when Twilight was really big, there were a bunch of magazines where it would show somebody tempted to go and see a movie about vampires.
Businesses were boarded up when...
There's nothing on. Wait, this is the show everyone at work has been talking about. It's supposed to be great. But it looks really spiritistic.
Vampires, werewolves, witches are all associated with the spirit world. So if our entertainment involves any of these, we might meditate on Psalms 97:10 and ask ourselves, do I really hate what Jehovah hates?
It doesn't look that bad. I know Jehovah hates spiritism.
Vampires drink blood. The biggest thing in the whole Bible is not drinking blood, apparently, according to Jehovah's Witnesses. So how awful. They're undead, and they drink blood. They're like a double XJW. All XJWs are undead zombies, first of all, and we all drink blood. This just comes with the contract you sign with Satan when you leave. So the organization, definitely does have rules about certain things. Like Harry Potter, yeah, there are some witnesses that watch Harry Potter. But you wouldn't want to tell anybody if you weren't super sure that they also watched it, because there have been a lot of not-so-subtle hints about the kinds of stuff that you're not allowed to watch. This isn't even counting for the fact that some circuit overseers just get a bug up their butt about something and will say from the platform, don't watch this thing. Even though they're not supposed to do that, they just do, and then you just have to agree with them because they're the circuit overseer. They're God's appointed brothers. Be patient. The small paintbrush. If you are not an XJW watching this, you have no idea what I'm talking about, the small paintbrush, but real ones know what I'm talking about. For example, I had a circuit overseer who went on a very impassioned speech against the movie I Am Legend, which had just come out, and which our family had already seen opening night because we were like, Will Smith's in a cool movie that's rated PG-13, which means we can see it. All right. And we all thought it was awesome, and we shouldn't tell anybody we saw it, probably, because it's kind of violent, and they're kind of zombies in it, but they're, not undead zombies, they're, cancer vaccine zombies. Is that the plot of I Am Legend? But the circuit overseer said, there is a horrible movie in the theaters called I Am Legend, and in this movie, they show the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society headquarters as being destroyed. Now, what he did not mention, probably because he did not know, because he was an ignorant and foolish old man who had no idea what he was talking about and was power tripping on his ego, was that every building in the entirety of New York was destroyed, and that was the whole point of the movie. There was, an apocalypse, and so most of the buildings were destroyed. So Jehovah's Witnesses don't have rules about Smurfs. Unless they do, because if an elder tells you not to watch it, then you kind of just have to stop watching it. Even though they're not supposed to tell you not to watch stuff. They do. And then you're just stuck with it. It's the last thing. And I'm trying to make the channel more PG these days, but there's just no way to really talk about this without just coming around and saying it. Oral and anal sex. The O and A S words, respectively. So a thing that was definitely true in the past was that oral and anal sex were forbidden within the organization, and they have flip-flopped on this a bunch of times. You can read a lot about this in depth in Raymond Francis' book, Crisis of Conscience. He was a member of the governing body when they were making these decisions and flip-flopping about oral and anal sex, and so it's really interesting to read the inside story about what kind of things people were putting inside things. Oh, that's not good. So for sure, in previous generations, this was a thing. And I remember the explanation being from my parents, as somebody who asked them, because I wanted that very much. Please, when I get married, do all the sexual things to me. They said, well, no, it originated from a homosexual practice. You see, the gays aren't able to please each other through natural means, so they had to invent these things. And I said, how could anyone possibly know that? How could anyone know that Adam and Eve didn't do all the sexual things? They lived to be hundreds of years old. I mean, are you telling me they just did missionary their entire lives with their perfect hot bodies? I don't think so. Not with these couple of snacks over here. It sort of stopped being talked about as a thing formally in the organization. So for folks like me, who grew up, let's face it, with much more sexualized entertainment in our comedies and sitcoms. You know, if you watch an episode of Friends or Seinfeld, they're going to talk about that stuff, even if it's in kind of a roundabout way that they can get away with on TV. This is stuff that we were all very aware of, and, you know, everyone's secretly looking at porn, and so, like, all the young people my age know what that is, know that it's normal, your friends at school are talking about it like it's normal, and the publications aren't talking about it at all for the most part. So, for people of my generation, to see stuff on Reddit about, like, they don't let you have oral or anal sex, I'm like, that is news to me, friend, because, actually, I'm a married man. And even, like, with my friends who would get married, you know, they would talk about doing the stuff that they did. And, like, guess what? Elders were doing it too. Everybody does this stuff, unless you're real boring and your marriage sucks. Or, according to The Sopranos, if you are an Italian mobster. In fact, there was an article a few years ago that talked about the issue without talking about the issue. It talked about what forms of love play are acceptable, which is a horrific term that I had never heard before that Watchtower, and I've never heard since that Watchtower. I guess they thought foreplay would be too real of a word. We have to leave it vague so that there's some plausible deniability. So most people reading that were like, oh, I know what they're talking about. A little bit of the... We all turned into cartoon wolves in a saloon in the 1940s. But they did want that plausible deniability because, as it turns out, in the correspondence guidelines, some internal rules for Jehovah's Witnesses, if, let's say, a witness wife goes to the elders and says, my husband wants me to perform oral, and I don't want to do that, but I also can't find anything in writing saying that we shouldn't do that, are we supposed to do that? The elders are directed to share the following information.
When inquiries are specifically made as to the propriety of oral or anal sex within marriage, reference can be made to the article Honor Godly Marriage in the March 15, 1983 issue of the Watchtower. There, perverted sexual practices within marriage are scripturally explained to be a form of uncleanness. Encourage the Christian couple to handle their intimate affairs so as to leave them with a good conscience. This is not a matter that the elders should feel that they need to inquire into or try to regulate. If husband and wife differ on this matter, which is often the basis of a letter of inquiry, the one who objects to a practice could attempt to reason with his or her mate, asking respect for his or her conscience.
As far as I know, this has not been overturned or overwritten, so this is still canon for witnesses. But most people aren't going to know this unless they specifically go to the elders and ask whether or not it's cool if they go down on their spouse. As far as unwritten rules go, this is a really confusing one, and I think speaks to the generational divide that has happened within the organization. This is an unwritten rule, and in fact a written rule for an older generation. For a younger generation who wants to find some leeway there, they do kind of have a written rule that gives them a get-out-of-jail-free card. The Bible doesn't say what kinds of love play I can get into, and I'm pretty sure that love play means licking some places. But nobody is entirely sure, so you just kind of have to hope that your marriage mate is into that, and you're not really supposed to talk about this kind of stuff until you're engaged as a witness, if at all. There are plenty of witness couples who don't talk about this stuff at all until they get married. If this all sounds kind of confusing, it is, and that's not necessarily an accident. Causing people to feel constantly in a state of, am I failing or am I succeeding? Am I doing something wrong? That plays right into Watchtower's hands. You better pray a lot and go to all the meetings and go out in service to make sure you're repenting for sins you might not know you're committing. These were just a few that came up in my Discord and off the top of my head, but this is definitely not an exhaustive list. If you know of some stuff, and there's about a billion things, sound off in the comments. What are some unwritten rules that I missed? And also, thank you to my patrons. If you want to join the Discord, it's a Patreon perk, so you can join that and hang out with us where we talk about our trauma and memes in equal measure. And if you can happen to see the Watchtower Bible and Tracts Society in the background of one shot, yeah, you can also see, like, I almost said the Eiffel Tower. I immediately blanked on any New York landmark.